I was what you are. You can become what I am.
Welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. I'm Kyptan, and joining me today we have Little Red Book,
Hello.
Befuddled Panda,
Everyone.
and Shesky.
Hey.
Today we're going to be continuing our discussion of the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells, talking about the third and fourth entries in the series, Rogue Protocol and Exit Strategy. Since we're going to be covering two sequels today, this episode will contain spoilers for both books. If you want to avoid them, I suggest you turn off the episode now. Okay, guys, let's get into it. Who had a harder time with one book over the other? I just want to get that one right out of the way here.
I was not. There were things I liked about Rogue Protocol, but there were some things that were weird about it, and it felt disconnected from the rest of the series in some ways.
Chesky?
Yeah, I liked them both. I think Rogue Protocol was just a little bit lower than Exit Strategy, but I still feel it's a pretty strong book on its own.
And Panda?
This was my second time reading Rogue Protocol, and I remember the first time that I read it, I didn't like it as much. There were some parts that felt a little repetitive with, like, All Systems Red, where Murderbot fought the compromised sec units at Deltfall. And I also found the setting of the facility and, like, all the places that they were going to a little bit hard to follow. I feel like if there had been a map of some sort where we could see where everything was in relation to everything else, that would have made it a bit easier to ground me. But after reading it the second time, I enjoyed it a bit more because I knew what was going to happen. I knew how things were going to end up, so I was able to just immerse myself more in the moments of the book where things were happening and enjoy the action.
Yeah, I also found it very difficult to visualize the facility, the terraforming facility.
Mm-hmm.
And I even found it difficult to visualize the cloud patterns because, like, a lot was left up to the reader, and it was like, sure, they called it pretty, they called it large and big, but they never really gave a very visual description of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was all about impressions.
So I will say one thing about the Rogue Protocol is that I love Mikey so much, or Mickey, I don't know, whichever it is.
I call him Mickey.
Okay, Mickey.
Yeah, Mickey.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
Mickey.
I love Mickey so much. She was amazing. It was amazing. Whatever. And I don't know, I can't remember the person who's the narrator for it, but he does a fantastic job with the voice for Mickey whenever she talks. And that was the one thing that I glommed onto the most in that book is the way Sec unit Murderbot relates to Mickey and how much Murderbot is struggling with not understanding that relationship, but wanting to, and kind of resenting that relationship that Mickey has with her owners. And I thought that was really well handled, and that was the best part of the book.
Okay. So everyone's agreed that they found Exit Strategy more engaging and interesting than Rogue Protocol?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that might possibly because like the other 3 books that we've read so far have been so good. And I'm also just going to assume that everyone agrees with that.
Yes.
Yes.
that Rogue Protocol really stands out. But I do think that there's an element where Murderbot learns something in each of the stories as we go along. What do you think Murderbot learned in Rogue Protocol? I completely am with Little Red Book in that Mickey is the best part. And I think that in Artificial Condition, Murderbot learned how to be friends with a bot with Art when there were no humans around. And in Rogue Protocol, Murderbot learns that even when there are humans around, it's possible for friendships between bots to exist, and also real friendships between bots and human owners.
Right.
That it doesn't have to be fake or coerced or
Professional.
artificial. Yeah, or professional. And I think that like that's the thing that really Murderbot walks away from this story having learned.
Agree. Yeah, and I think my my first read of Rogue Protocol, I actually found Mickey a bit annoying. I didn't really understand like what the point was, but as Little Red Book said, the narrator. So for the second read, I did the audiobook. The narrator lent more personality to Mickey's character and helped me get a better sense of what that character was supposed to be like. And I then ended up really enjoying Mickey's character and got to see just between Murderbot and Mickey's interactions, how they played off of each other. And I completely agree in that from Rogue Protocol, we got to really see, or at least Murderbot really got to see how a pet robot doesn't have to be a bad thing, because the owner, I can't remember how to say their names, like Abane or something.
I call her
something.
Dona Bean.
Dona Bean.
That works. She like at the end when she tells Mickey, no, your priority is to save yourself, and Mickey's like, that's nice, but no, I want my priority to be saving you and helping Murderbot. And then Murderbot later on was like, oh, they actually programmed Mickey to have that choice.
Yep.
And that was a very
It's like the 3 most influential words that Mickey can say is
yes.
like and change Murderbot's opinion is priority change rejected.
Yes. Yeah.
Who cried? I cried.
Yeah. It completely changes how you think about Mickey.
Yep.
And how Murderbot thinks about Mickey. And it does show how we see things from Murderbot's point of view.
Right, and he's an unreliable narrator. He, she, it.
Yeah.
Murderbot. Chesky, what do you think? You're quiet.
Chesky?
My trouble.
Oh. At least it's not me.
Chesky, you okay over there?
I wish I was okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd let you know.
You try and fix that. We'll move on to favorites. We've covered Little Red's favorite. Panda, what's your favorite? And then let's also talk about least favorites. Let's talk about the high and the lows of the books.
Just a minute. We talked about my favorite in the first book that we're talking about.
In the first book. In the first book. We're just talking about the first book for now.
Okay.
What is my favorite? I think I would have to echo Little Red Book. Like Mickey was the best part, and the realizations that Murderbot got. Oh, I guess there is one thing, which is when Murderbot first like interacts with Mickey and starts understanding Mickey's personality. And I'll just like read the quote because I have it here. And it Murderbot's like, Mickey was a bot who had never been abused or lied to or treated with anything but indulgent kindness. It really thought its humans were its friends because that's how they treated it. And then Murderbot signals Mickey that it needs to withdraw from their communication because it needed a minute to have an emotion in private. And I cracked up.
Yeah.
Those were such funny parts when he's like, "Oh, I need a few minutes to like go have my own emotions. I'm not used to this. Leave me alone."
I need to
And Libby-
process.
Murderbot
Right.
really misses its armor.
Yeah.
And looping back into that, the fact that it actually says like, no, I needed a minute, like 60 seconds, like
A whole minute. Yeah.
the whole, like all through all the books, I'm at 95% capacity. I'm at, I needed 5.2 seconds, and just I love that part about it. Just added some nice flavor.
Like when you think about the amount of things that Murderbot can do in a minute in combat.
Right.
Yeah.
When you think about the things Murderbot can do in a second in combat, and that it felt the need for a full minute to respond to Mickey to go and process emotions. Good on the author. Good on the
Mhm.
author for making that effective.
Yeah.
It's very realistic. I mean, how many times do we as regular humans without supercomputers in our brains need more than just a half a minute to like actually process something really important for us?
I mean, never. That's why I'm so touched by this. It's like an unimaginable amount of comprehension that Murderbot is doing in that moment. Okay, least favorites.
Wait, I wanted to say something for my favorites, if that's
Okay,
still
yeah, go.
Just sticking true to my favorite level oneness stuff. I just loved how much Murderbot doesn't pay. He feels so human, but he doesn't pay attention to anything that like regular humans put value on. Money, he doesn't care about it. He's like, oh, I still had the money stick. They must have paid me a lot because I was still using it and it still kept going through. And then he was talking about that humans are so freaking unreliable when it comes to maintaining data. And I was like, that's true right there. We are so bad at inputting things and making sure it looks right. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just so truthful there. Realistic.
Very accurate. I do like Murderbot's extremely vague conception of money. It feels almost pre-numerate. Murderbot's conception of money is like a lot or a little or ooh, that must have been a huge amount. It's all very qualitative. I get the feeling like Murderbot still, because I mean, how often on a serial or on a TV show do they specify an exact number or dollar amount for something?
Never.
That's a good point.
Never, not once. They just say, "Oh, something's really expensive," or "Oh, it's cheap." Like when you see people out for a fancy dinner on a TV show, they never bring an actual dollar amount for the bill.
Because that would be boring. Why would you want to know that?
Also, it will date it because of inflation.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, good point. Another good point.
I actually had a guest call and complain about one of our prices. He's like, it was good. The food was good, but it wasn't $50 good. I'm like, okay, well,
How old was
minimum
the
wage went
guest?
up. I don't know.
Okay.
Probably pretty old. He's a regular. And I was like, our water bill is this much a month. This is how much we're paying in payroll every day,
Yep.
and he just didn't get it. My dad didn't either. back in the day.
Restaurant markups are something they need to hire people.
Exactly.
To
To keep the
survive.
lights on.
Yeah, it's a business. It has to make money.
Yep.
Maybe he thought there was too much salt. I don't know.
I don't know either. But salmon is not cheap, guys. It's expensive.
No.
It's like $15 a pound on a good day.
But Murderbot would have no idea.
I know. And he's also never had to deal with money ever until now.
Yep.
So that's part of it too.
Has never had access to.
Yeah. I mean, he's been a slave,
Um,
basically.
Yeah. So I think we've pretty much covered our feelings about Rogue Protocol. Everyone feel okay to move on to exit strategy and a discussion of both books?
Sure.
Because there's a great moment that I want to bring up in exit strategy about money and commerce and being able to participate in the economy for the first time. And it's when Murderbot buys its own clothes for the first time.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
good.
And like gets to pick out basically the same clothes it was already wearing, but in like a slightly different color. A slightly slightly altered boot with closed toes and lots of pockets on everything. Lots of sealable pockets, got a new backpack. And I really appreciated that. And it was like, we can talk about the humanizing moments of Murderbot, but I think, and how we don't want Murderbot to become fully human, as we discussed in the previous episode. We want Murderbot to become its own thing. But that was definitely a humanizing moment for Murderbot, was buying clothes for the first time.
I mean, that kind of reminded me of in Harry Potter when Dobby becomes free and it's with a sock. It's like a piece of clothing, even though Dobby didn't get to choose it, but the piece of clothing was like a mark of its freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that Murderbot got to actually select everything. It wasn't hand me down. It wasn't like, oh, that's what they had on hand. It got to choose every single element, and then it realized, oh, this is what I like, so this is my style.
Yep. It wasn't selected by art.
I like the part where he's like, I like it almost enough to remove the quotations from the word like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love living in Murderbot's head. It's so great.
Murderbot's like slowly removing the levels of pretending from its identity, because in Artificial Condition it was pretending to be an augmented human, and in Rogue Protocol it was pretending to be a security consultant hiring a sec unit of itself. So that was a fun little level of removal there. But in exit strategy, Murderbot never actually pretended, like with words, to be anything other than itself.
So,
It never said to anybody it was an augmented human.
Right.
Sure,
So,
it might have like pretended to be one, but yeah. Sorry, go Red.
Go Red. So one of the things I found really interesting about after its catastrophic fail, and it's rebuilding its memory, is that he
Mhm.
talks about how there's these walls, and he keeps putting back the walls because he doesn't want to deal with what's on the other side of the wall, which is relating to people. It's complicated. Like, it's a very complicated mental thing that's going on there.
Yeah.
And the appreciation of the fact that this thing that he hates, emotions, actually help him rebuild his database and what's going on in his memories. And he's basically becoming more integrated. Like,
Mhm.
and it's just so that last part of exit strategy really got to me because it's not becoming more human, it's becoming more itself. And anyway, I'm kind of trailing off because I'm not sure how to explain it but that part really touched me because I think that's what the whole series is ultimately about, is becoming
Yeah.
yourself.
I really hate the term construct that Martha Wells uses to describe or not that Martha Wells uses, but that the society she writes uses to describe a combination of biological and mechanical components. And it's really kind of a demeaning term in universe. Like, oh, it's just a construct. It's not a person. It's just like barely one step up from a bot, but not even really qualitatively. But it's very clear that Murderbot is more than something that someone made on like a factory line somewhere. That Murderbot is a person, and that the union of the biological and mechanical has a whole bunch of strengths and maybe even makes Murderbot more of a person than just one of the two on its own.
Yeah. Something I liked that kind of goes along with this is that in this book, he's always talking about how sec units aren't ever allowed to sit down or use human furniture. And like every chance he gets, he takes a seat and he puts his feet up. And then he realizes, I actually don't like putting my feet up. I'm going to put them back down. But it's kind of like that evolution of his self. Like he's no longer just a sec unit. He's his own person. And he's like, well, I want to sit down. And so I'm going to, instead of being like, oh, I shouldn't, because I don't want them to know I'm hacked. They already know. So he's allowed to be himself more, where he's not having to pretend, or, he's being able to be himself.
Though still doesn't understand why there's a bed big enough for 4 people, but only one hook for a towel.
I love that part. That was hilarious. They're supposed to share the towel?
The humor continues. The humor definitely continues in these books.
Yep. And it's one of the things that makes me not cry through the entire books. 'Cause there's these moments of humor, like the part where he said something about the plan that's almost not terrible, and then he had to switch to the
Operation
closely
not actually a completely terrible plan.
right. Operation approaching a terrible plan.
Terrible plan? Yeah.
I turned my risk assessment module off.
Right.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
My
It
last
was wonky.
diagnostic said it was pretty wonky. Yeah, I know that explains a lot about me.
It was so great. But those moments like take the edge off what is actually happening in the book, because what's happening is deadly serious, not only on the physical level, but on the emotional level, the formative level for Murderbot, if that makes sense. Like it
Yeah.
kind of, you know,
I feel like Murderbot has stronger emotions than I do on a regular day.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
I
not
think
me, but yeah.
And like a better range of the humor and comedic values for sure.
Panda,
think-
what were you going to say?
Oh yeah. It's because my theory is that because as a sec unit, you're not allowed to have all these ranges of emotions because your governor module would punish you if you got angry or had these emotions that it deemed not appropriate. But without the governor module, Murderbot is allowed to have these emotions, and we see it progress book by book, where it's experiencing more and more extreme emotions. And part of why it needs time to process is because it's never really been able to have these emotions before. It doesn't know what to do. But as it's going through what's happening and all these different interactions with people, it's now gaining more and more experience and having more context for those emotions, and therefore it knows it. By the end of exit strategy, we see that it's able to process its emotions better, and as Little Red mentioned before, that the emotions actually helps its healing process to get back its memories.
Speaking of that healing process and Murderbot's journey to grow, how do we feel about the core reason that Murderbot felt like it needed to run away, which is Dr. Mensa? And how do you feel that relationship developed over the course of these two books?
I think, I mean, for Intense, this Murderbot feels like an adult person, but I think really he's more, or it is more of a teenagerish person with just a lot of brain power behind it, because he's in an unknown situation with Dr. Mensa at the end of the first book. You know, hey, we'll take you home, you'll be safe. But he doesn't believe it, he can't trust it, and so he runs away. And I feel like that's a
Yeah.
pretty typical response for a lot of people when they're going through the unknown for the first time. They run away, they experience life, then they come back and they see, oh, you know, this is what you were offering me was real and was true. And Murderbot's always, you know, acknowledging his own emotions. You know, I sounded sulky because I was being sulky. Example.
Yeah, and I think in Rogue Protocol, Murderbot even says, "Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure what Mensa wanted me to do. It was like educate me or civilize me. I don't know. I was vague on the details." um,
One of my favorite parts of his meeting up with Dr. Mensa is that she apologizes. She's like, "Look, I handled that badly." Like, she
Yep.
understands what she did wrong, that she thought she was the whole keeping safe part. Like,
Mhm.
Murderbot didn't want to be safe. He just wanted to be left alone. And she's like, "Yeah, I'm really sorry.
Wanted to
I
be
handled."
free.
Right, right, and make his own decisions.
Yep.
And I think that that moment where she apologizes and Murderbot has to look at her. I mean, it feels like it has to actually look at her, not with the cameras. Was just a really powerful moment where it's like processing the fact that, you know, when you're in a relationship, you make mistakes and you accidentally hurt somebody, and they accidentally hurt you. And that's it's kind of a breakthrough
Yep.
for Murder. So
Yeah, and the part that I think really helped was Mensa brought up that she actually went and watched Sanctuary Moon. And
Mhm.
Murderbot's like, wait, what? Why? And when she basically explained that, like, she wanted to understand why Murderbot enjoyed the show, because it was something that was important to Murderbot. And that kind of showed Murderbot that Mensa isn't going to be just like another owner, because she was giving, not just taking in the relationship.
right.
And that was a pretty powerful moment.
I mean, I
Really
don't know about you
emotional.
guys, but when I have a boyfriend who says he wants to read the Stormlight Archive so he can understand better, like, I think that's a great thing.
Chesky, were you gonna say something?
Just don't touch my
Um,
leatherbacks.
no, I think I was just gonna echo that. Just that Dr. Mensa was showing that she is cared and she cared enough about him to do something she normally wouldn't have done, watch Sanctuary Moon. And that just shows him, you know, oh, one more sign that I can trust, you know, what she's trying to tell me.
It's
Yeah.
really touching.
Yeah.
And the part where Penley walks in and like hands him a bunch of money at the very end is like, you can go
Yeah.
off wherever. That was amazing.
Like,
Especially
this is
after she's
illegal, so don't say it. Don't say anything about it.
especially after she's like, I forgot how much of an a-hole you are.
One one part I liked, it's in the end here at that where he's reconstructing his memory banks and he's talking about the people who he helped out in the third book, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to go out and help you guys again." And Pinley's like, "Hey, you actually can't make a deal with him until he's healed or fixed himself, basically." And Murderbot's like, "Why? Is it because I'm not my own owner? I have to get approval?" And he's like, "No, jerk and a-hole. It's because you're not ready yet. You're not better.
It's
You
because
need to
of your
get better
legal
first."
counsel.
Yeah, I'm your legal counsel. Like, and Murderbot was like, "Oh, like you weren't trying to be a jerk. You were like looking out for me again." So
Yeah, there was that one part where I believe it was Pinley who said like, "Oh, you can hire yourself to go do whatever jobs, right?"
mhm.
And Murderbot's like, "Oh, I like the sound of that. I get to hire myself," because how I read that was that Murderbot was thinking, you know, an owner, a client, like somebody with power hires somebody else to do something. And so if I'm hiring myself, it means I have that power, right? I get to dictate what I get to do, what I want to do.
Yep. Self-employment. It's seductive.
It comes with a whole lot of other problems, but yes.
Look, the idea is seductive, okay?
I would agree. Yes.
The idea is
Um,
very seductive, unfortunately.
But I like the moment. There's a whole bunch of moments from the reconstruction where Murderbot's talking to Gurathan, and they're rubbing against each other like flint and steel, and he says, "I'm going to put your operational capacity at 55%," and Murderbot says, "F you," and he says, "Okay, 60%."
Great.
And I love that the catalytic moment for like Murderbot really starting to put itself together again is when it finds the rise and fall of Sanctuary Moon in its databanks. That like it was kind of like randomly bouncing around inside of its own head for a while, just making a few connections, some very small minor ones. And then all of a sudden it had the rise and fall of Sanctuary Moon. And because that's such a touchstone to Murderbot's life, just going through all of that brought back basically everything in its history.
Yeah.
Because when is Murderbot not thinking about the rise and fall of Sanctuary Moon?
Yeah, even when it's like doing serious things and it'll just say, "Oh yeah, I was playing an episode in the background."
Yep.
It's like, wow.
Like,
And it specifically makes mention of
when like the fourth armed person came into the lobby, I paused my episode.
yeah, every time he makes sure he's like, "Well, this was getting serious, so I actually had to pause my show. Like I couldn't just keep watching it while doing other stuff."
But maybe now it can, now that it had all that experience at Milu and had to do all that multi-threading and open up its neural capacity more and
Yes.
better integrate and up its multitasking to the point where it like kind of fought off a combat sec unit.
Kind of.
Held off for like a minute.
Yeah.
Long time.
Yeah. I think that part was very clever of Martha Wells to have that tie back moment to what happened in Rogue Protocol. And I do wonder if it was a bit intentional in that it is a bit confusing. It is a bit not as smooth of a reading experience because Murderbot was stretched. Its capacity to do all these things was stretched. And then once we get into exit strategy, things were a bit smoother because it got practice and experience and juggling all these different inputs. And so was able to do it better in exit strategy.
Rogue Protocol is definitely a book that sets up a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But name a single character and like a character trait from that person other than Mickey and Donna Bean. And Donna Bean, whatever.
Bounty
we're calling
Hunter
her.
number 1 and 2, and their trait would be backstabbery.
Yeah, right? That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
and like assistant 1 and 2,
yeah,
and 3 and 4.
And
I
the
kind of-
captured hostage.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's like assistant 3.
And that's not even really a character.
Not really.
I mean, if you think about the 4 books, that we've read so far, and you kind of move them into like if they were one book, that Rogue Protocol is kind of that calm right before the final storm.
hmm
As you move into the end of the book and everything's starting to ramp up, this is like the last low spot, and that's kind of why it feels a little off in comparison to the other ones.
It's like a middle step in so many different plot lines, and like
Yeah.
every plot line and every character arc and every bit of it is a middle step that you could
Right.
probably have cut out entirely from the series, and it wouldn't have greatly affected anything.
The only thing it does is give Murderbot a reason to go back because the evidence that he finds. That's the only thing it does. So that could have been like a chapter, a prologue.
Yeah.
I don't know
Except
if it
for
could have been
Mickey.
just a protocol.
I mean, they're all novellas. They're all extremely short.
Right.
So I guess to have this much character development, this many story arcs, and I mean, Murderbot's gone on like what 2 missions, and now has decided to return to Mensa. Murderbot's had
3.
like two.
See, how
The travel from one place to another does not count as a mission.
but he acts as the counselor to all the people on board with the candy wrapper in the sink or the cracker wrapper.
It was an experience.
That was so much fun reading about. I deleted the issue as soon as I walked away. Like, I don't even remember what they were arguing about.
And I mean, that was an incredibly dark journey that they were on, and Mensa's like, oh, it was too late to help them because they'd signed away their lives for indentured servitude for 20 years and didn't even know by what calendar they were basing it on.
I know. Oh my God. That was terrible. That whole thing.
I mean, it's reminiscent of history, so I can't knock it that bad, but it's sad.
Oh, you
Yeah.
could still knock it. We did a lot of dumb things as people.
We still do.
Yeah,
The
we still do a
Corporation
lot of
Rim is
dumb things.
How do people feel about the Corporation Rim? Do we all
How do
hate
people
it?
feel about it?
I mean, yeah,
The Rim
kinda.
Corporation being the sec unit renters?
No,
the
the
company, or-
Corporation Rim is like the name for the whole region of space.
Very realistic. A corporation would buy that and promote it like that to get all the advertising and knowledge out there.
Oh my goodness, all the data mining, the listening, the recording, there is no net neutrality. Like,
Yep.
it could be our future. I mean, some parts of it is our future, is our present.
I was just gonna say some of it is happening now.
It's like, oh, you can have the like public guest network, or you can
Which
have the
we
one that actually
purposely
works.
We're going to record everything in all the public areas.
hmm
Well, I mean, I have an Android, so I'm pretty sure Google knows my entire life.
I mean, it
Which
doesn't
is-
matter what phone you have.
No, I
Yeah.
know, but the point is that I mean.
But yeah, no. Google sends me an email every month about where I've been.
Oh, jeez. Google knows where I work, and I've never told it.
Yeah.
Google's like, oh, you spent this much time walking and this much time in a car and this much time skiing. And I'm like, what? I'm moderately impressed that it knows when I'm skiing and when I'm not.
Well, the only time you're getting up above like 5 miles an hour that you're not in a car. Was it like he went up to this mountain? I wonder what he could be doing there. I don't know.
Oh, there's a ski resort here.
There's a ski resort here. Oh, look, here's the trail map. Look, he's matching the trails. Okay.
And he's going 60 miles an hour.
Yeah, on a good day.
I don't know. I never skied.
I think my max is like 65. My brother's max is 77, but that was right before he flew off the trail into the nets.
Oh,
Was he
So,
okay?
luckily, yes, but other skiing accidents he was not as okay with. I've only broken my arm skiing, luckily.
I'm gonna say I know some people who have had much more dire consequences from skiing, unfortunately. So
Yeah. Extreme sports.
Uh,
Speaking of personal experiences with injury, I found Murderbot's reconstruction process to be very much like recovering from severe trauma. Does anyone else have an experience that like made them empathize with Murderbot's reconstruction?
thankfully, no.
I've had emotional trauma that somewhat felt like that, but nowhere near as like clear cut and defined. Like,
Oh,
oh, I'm here, I'm 50%, now I'm 60%. It's you're up one day, you're down the next. But I
I've
mean,
had like
yeah.
multiple concussions and amnesia, and I found it very relatable.
Oh
oh
dear.
no.
uh, like
I
there
was
is a fog that you can't recognize is a fog until it's gone, and you're like, oh wow, I can think again.
Oh
I
man.
didn't notice that I couldn't think really.
I was gonna say I've gone through one um very serious life change that actually I didn't have a concussion, thank goodness. But when you're in the certain stage of grief, it can be so bad that you can't. It is like that. I couldn't remember
Oh,
my PIN number. I couldn't. I couldn't remember if I paid a bill. I couldn't remember. Luckily, I was able to make sure that the kids got to school, but that was about all I was capable of doing for about 6 months,
Oh wow.
and I couldn't
there's
eat either. So it was great.
one of my friends does studies about theory of mind using MRI machines, and he had a friend. So this is like third-hand information, but he
So
said
great.
that she was doing a PhD project on depression and its effect on memory, and
Mhm.
specifically how it causes you to forget all sorts of things. And he said that she had the biggest problem keeping her patients, like having them remember that they were supposed to be in the MRI that day.
Yep.
They would call her and they'd say, "I completely forgot. I'm sorry." And he said that it had long passed the part where she was angry or annoyed, and she just found it hilarious because they were proving her study, but not in a way that she could publish.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, it's true. I was in a really bad place, and I could not remember. Had to reset my PIN for my debit card probably 15 times in 6 months because I
Oof.
just couldn't remember it. So anyway,
Yeah.
Well, and
No.
there, even through that traumatic experience for Murderbot, it still kept its humor and sass intact. And where there was that one part where Murderbot is looking at this door in like the med bay area, and it's trying to figure out what the door says, and then later on it's like, oh, it says restroom. Like that's not even useful to me. I just spent all this brain power understanding it, and it's not useful.
Yeah.
yep, 100% relatable.
So now let's go past the restoration and let's talk about the ending. How did people feel, and were they surprised by Murderbot's decision to stay at Preservation Ox? And I'd love to talk specifically also about how Murderbot like buys a ticket off the station but doesn't get on. Red?
um, it made sense to me, and the reason why it made sense to me was because Dr. Mensah said, you don't have to make a decision right this minute. You can think about it. And here is a safe place for you to think about where you want to go from here. And she tells him about the job offer. She gets to encounter the small human, or Murderbot gets to encounter the small human. And he's like, I've been running around and I've been in multiple firefights for the last 6 months. I don't know how long this has been going on, 2 years, whatever. And
I mean,
now,
it seems like a matter of like weeks and months.
yeah, it does. I was thinking about 6 months, it seems like. But she's like, here's a place, Murderbot, where you can sit and be quiet and you can watch your media and you can figure yourself out. And here's some job offers, and you're probably going to get more. Or you can go on this little planet trip with us. And the fact that he's allowed to wander around the station for like at least 48 hours
Yep.
and nobody comes after him, it makes sense that he stays and says, okay. And I thought it was a great ending, by the way. Like,
And they make like a little security network for it.
oh, I know.
Yeah.
So sweet.
I didn't think it was that unsurprising or that surprising that he was going to stay. I think that's kind of what they've been leading you along to with every book, is that every book he becomes a little bit better at talking with humans and dealing with people and just interacting in general, and seeing, oh, these people, they treat him good, they won't treat him bad, and seeing that Dr. Mensah really cared for him and all of that. And then when he was even at the shuttle, he'd bought tickets and he was waiting to see, and he never saw any like increase in like, oh, that's the one he bought a ticket for, let's put extra security on there. Just that
Yeah.
he could see the trust that they had for him, that like, oh, it's just Murderbot, he's not like, he's just Murderbot, like if he wants to leave he can leave, he's not like, oh, we have to watch him extra careful. And I think that's part, that was the final like step to him being like, oh, I can't stay here, they do kind of just see me as another person even though I'm not.
No, but he
Yeah,
is.
when Murderbot bought a ticket so far in advance, I was like, well, that's not typical. I was like, it's got to be a test. It's got to be a test. Murderbot's not going to run away from Mensah again, is he? Right?
Well, I mean, Murderbot doesn't actually need to buy a ticket, right? Like, it's shown that
Yeah.
if it wants to leave, it can just negotiate with the pilots, the bot pilots. And I think it was a nice full circle moment where, in All Systems Red, it was basically in this position. And this time it decided to make a different choice because of all the things it's gone through, the reflection and self-searching that it's been able to do. And now it's about Murderbot making its own choice to stay, not because like it needed safety necessarily or that somebody was telling it that it needed to stay. It got to make its own choice. And, having access to the large displays probably helped too.
Because everywhere that Murderbot's gone, it's only been able to stay on a station for like, what, a day or two?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not very long.
Like, Murderbot doesn't want to be a nomad just traveling in unpiloted bot transport ships watching media forever and ever. Like, Murderbot doesn't actually want that.
Yeah,
Right. There's a
like he
part
really
of him
got
that
a
wants
purpose
that,
at the end.
but
Yeah.
it's not the real part.
Especially after having to shove itself inside a locker and not move for like 6 weeks or something. Yeah. That wasn't great. So, if the series had ended with exit strategy, would you have been satisfied? If so, why? If not, why? Personally, I say yes. I would have been happy.
Oh, I would have too. I mean, I'm excited that there's another one. In fact, I had to stop myself from
Yep.
starting it. But it's a great ending where he's paused and he's living in the moment and really getting to think about things for the first time since the first book.
You know,
Panda?
um, I do think this exit strategy was meant to be the last book because in my copy, the like flap in the book says it's the fourth and final part of the Murderbot Diaries. And yeah, so I think Martha Wells did think that it was going to be the last one. So she did make things pretty, like, there was a lot of closure. And but she still left some things a bit more open ended, but not in a frustrating way. It was
Mhm.
more of, and you can use your imagination to think of what happens next. But I've provided you this foundation, this pretty solid foundation to work off of. So I would agree. Like if the series had just ended here, I would have been satisfied. But I'm really glad that it didn't because Network Effect is so good.
Yeah, I'm also very glad that it did not end here.
I think those authors. It's just so tough to get them to actually finish a series and let it stay finished. But I think I don't know when it said murder. I just kind of assumed the short stories were done, or like the Murderbot Diaries part was done. But I thought it was a great ending. I thought it was good, but left it open if she wanted to continue more. And I'm excited to read the fifth book eventually.
I know. I have so much I have to read, guys.
Okay. We're coming up on 50 minutes, so let's wrap things up. Let's give some final ratings of the two books. I'm going to give Rogue Protocol. I'm going to give it a 3. And I'm going to give Exit Strategy a 5.
I would give Rogue
Oh, go
Protocol a 4 and Exit Strategy a 5. So I would like.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm gonna give Rogue Protocol, I think, a 3.5.
3.5 is a good marker. I'll change mine to that.
And Exit Strategy is a 5 for sure.
Yeah, I would say the first time I read Rogue Protocol is definitely a 3. Having reread it, it's almost a 4. Not 100% because I would say like there are quite a few characters, but like Kyptan said, they're not very fleshed out. You can't really tell the difference. And then Exit Strategy is definitely a 5.
If
I
all
do.
4 of these books were in one book and I had to give it a rating, I would definitely give it a 5, but I would say it like in the third quarter or in the second quarter. No, yeah, the third quarter. It definitely took a bit of a dip.
So there's one thing I want to say that I have not said.
Okay,
If you don't mind.
not at all.
Have any of you guys read The Velveteen Rabbit?
Yes.
A
I've
long
listened
time
to the
ago.
story, but no.
Okay. So the way I would describe this book is this is a action adventure blood-soaked version of The Velveteen Rabbit. It's about how to become real. So, anyway,
I don't know. I have a rebuttal to that.
okay.
Because in Rogue Protocol, during his reconstruction, Murderbot specifically says, I don't want to be human. And everybody's
Yes.
like,
No.
well, why not? Like, human looking things. Don't you want to be human? Like, aren't we the
I don't
best?
No, wait,
specifically
wait, wait.
no,
Mensa does
that's-
not say that.
Yes. Yes, she
The
No,
does.
Velveteen Rabbit.
Mensa says a lot of people will have problems thinking a lot of people will have problems accepting that.
Well, yes.
And I
Mensa says that about other people, not about herself.
would say that The Velveteen Rabbit isn't about becoming human. It's about becoming real. which means
He does become real.
exactly. He becomes a real person, not a
Yeah.
human, a real person.
Just giving you a little bit of a hard time.
That's
A,
fine.
re- a
I could
real
take it.
person with real responsibilities and real freedom.
Yep.
Yep.
I gotta call my boss, guys. So I gotta
I mean,
go here pretty quick.
certainly more freedom than those people on the journey to indentured slavery.
Right? That was heartbreaking, honestly.
Yeah, that was bad. Okay. Thank you guys for joining us on the Legendarium Green Team. Please join the Legendarium Discord or Reddit to yell at us about what we got wrong, or shout out to the Green Team Pod on Twitter. If you're an exceptionally generous soul, please feel free to join our Patreon. Until next time.
Goodbye.
Bye.